Hello, and welcome to this special edition of the Newsfeed. I'm Chloe Spillane. On today's show, we'll be taking a look at college dating culture, the dynamics between committed and casual dating, and what expectations culture puts on students and their relationships. Before we dive in, let's take a moment to get to know our guests. First, to my right, we have Lauren Naldo, a staff counselor at Cook Counseling Center. Next, we have Lori Fritsch, the assistant co-director of health education at Shifford Health Center. Then, immediately to my left, we have Victoria Blanchard, a human development professor at Virginia Tech. And last but not least, we have Tanner Sparkman, a Virginia Tech student. Let's get started with this question. How do you see college students approaching dating and relationships today? We'll start with you, Lauren.
I think I've noticed that there's a pretty wide spectrum of how people approach dating. I certainly think there's students who tend to seek out a committed relationship because they really are looking for a life partner and somebody to have a serious committed relationship with. And then I think that there, like I said, a wide spectrum. Also people who may tend to do casual dating, casual sexual relationships. So I think that there's a wide range of how college students approach dating today.
Yeah. And we actually conduct the National College Health Assessment through our office every other year, and we have results from spring 2014 that really back that up. We have about 52% of our students who are in long-term committed relationships, and the others who are kind of just having casual hookups or not having any relationships. Yeah.
Tanner, what do you think as a student?
Well, I've noticed that in my friend group, there's about half of them that are probably in relationships with someone else who's in the friend group. And then there's the other half that are constantly single, they're not really looking for anything. And so I think it really shows that it's not really like someone is looking for a life-term relationship or doing both. It's kind of like one person is doing this and then one person is at this different place in their life where they're just going to casually date and not really looking for a long-term. And so I think you just kind of have both these kinds of people.
I'd like to add, I agree that there's this a wide spectrum in terms of people's experiences, but in my human sexuality classes, when I ask students, okay, tell me what dating is like on campus, kind of the response I get with a lot of chuckles is, it used to be how long do you date before you have sex, now it's how long do you have sex before you date. And so I think despite the fact that there's a lot of variety, I think there's a perception that everyone's participating in these casual hookups and that it's not going further. And maybe some just kind of not sure how to get to that point for some students.
So do you think overall relationships are approached more casually in modern day society?
I think that there's just a lot of misperception, like Victoria just said. I mean, we know that almost 30% of our students, when asked if they've had sex within the last year, said they have had 0 sexual partners. So that perception for people, most people think that everyone's having sex with everyone. And really, we have about 45% of our students who have had one sexual partner within the last year. So again, a majority of our students, or at least more than half, are kind of in that monogamous situation, and then just as as we've been talking, there's kind of that other half who are hooking up and figuring out when they're going to be in a relationship.
And I think social media can alter people's perceptions,
Yeah.
And just certain groups on campus and certain people are going to get more attention. And so if those are the ones, in the casual relationships, everyone might think, oh gosh, this is what's happening, when you just don't hear about the committed relationships as much.
Right. So do you think dating has changed a lot since you guys were dating in college?
That's a good question.
There were no cell phones, so
Right.
the conversation piece
texting
just wasn't
and
there. I mean, you had to literally have a conversation with someone. And so sometimes you may not say something, or you would omit it completely from giving that partner any knowledge. But you had to at least have a conversation.
Meet up with them and have a conversation in person, I think.
Or speak on the phone.
That's significant.
So do you think social media is negatively or positively impacted?
I'm not one to, say social media is all negative. I think there are some negative aspects of it, and for a lot of people it can function very negatively. But I think there's a lot of good things. I mean, if you're, meeting people through other people you know, or for people who do have a lot of social anxiety, it can be a really good tool for them to make those initial first steps in reaching out to someone they're interested in without some of the real life problems that can happen when you're stuttering in front of someone you're nervous, in front of. So.
I would agree with that. I think it creates a lot of safety sometimes for people who are scared to go out into the dating world. And it maybe gives them a step to be seen in their best self that they wouldn't necessarily be seen in had they not had that.
Right.
I think a big thing for me is it also increases the amount of people that you come in contact with. So with social media, you get this broader range, and you can start talking to people who don't necessarily live in this city and don't necessarily, you wouldn't have known who they were outside of social media. So I think it also gives you this like broader range of people to potentially date or be in a relationship with, and so I think that's a big plus.
Okay. Well, coming up after the break, we ask Virginia Tech students what they think about college dating culture. Stay tuned.
Here's your check. Oh, you got it. Since I got rid of my car, I really enjoy walking.
Okay.
Getting pulled over for buzz driving could cost you around $10,000 in fines, legal fees, and increased insurance rates.
Oh, you're home early.
You live with your mom?
That'll set your game back a few years. Buzzed, busted, and broke. Because buzz driving is drunk driving.
Welcome back to this special edition of the Newsfeed. Today's topic, dating and relationships in college. We're back with Laura Naldo from the Cook Counseling Center, Lori Fritsch from the Schiffer Health Center, Victoria Blanchard, a human development professor, and senior Tanner Sparkman. We recently surveyed 115 Virginia Tech students to gauge their thoughts on the current climate of collegiate dating. Then we took to campus to learn more. Newsfeed reporter Stephen Burnison has more. Stephen?
Thanks, Chloe. After surveying 115 people, we found that 59% of Virginia Tech undergrads are looking for a long-term relationship, while 22% are looking for more casual dating. We went to campus to learn more. Does this surprise you in any way?
Probably not. I have been in a relationship for 6 years, so I'll stick with the long-term percentage, but no, that doesn't surprise me.
I would have thought it would be higher on the casual dating side, personally.
I feel like most people's general aim is to eventually find a long-term relationship, so why stop that or hesitate to get to that point?
I don't know. I know some people kind of grow up and be more responsible in college, so they'd be looking for more long-term, but then you do have the ones who just want to kind of party, and I feel like they'd be looking for casual relationships.
We surveyed 115 undergraduates and found that 59% are looking for a long-term relationship, while 22% are looking for more casual dating. Does this surprise you in any way?
Not that much. I guess I thought it would be more even, but yeah.
I agree. I feel like more girls are looking for long-term relationships, and I think there's more girls on our campus, so it kind of makes sense.
It kind of surprises me a little bit. I feel like in today's day and age, the hookup culture is very prevalent, and to hear that many people are looking for long-term relationships, it seems kind of weird that they're going about that in that way.
No, not in college. I would expect more people to look for a long-term relationship in college, kind of moving on to the next step, so I'm not too surprised by that.
I agree. I think that in college, people are kind of starting to settle down a little bit. Maybe in the beginning of college, people are more oh, whatever. And then by the end, they're oh, I should probably figure my life out. So it doesn't surprise me too much.
Well, there you have it. That's just a small sample of the many voices to be heard on the Virginia Tech campus. For more, we'll send it back into the studio. I'm Stephen Burnison, reporting for the Newsfeed.
After seeing the numbers and the student reactions, what are your thoughts? Did anything surprise you? We'll start with Tanner.
I don't think anything is too surprising, because I think what happens is when you're looking for the more casual scene, you're going to go out to bars more often, and then it's going to be that same group of people. So you're going to have this very small group of people that are all going out to the bars looking for this casual scene, and so you start to think that, oh, this is everybody at Virginia Tech, and you're not realizing all the people that are staying home with their boyfriend and girlfriend just to spend the Friday night with just them, or they're going out to eat. So you get this weird perception where you think that everyone at Virginia Tech is at that bar looking for which is not true because there's like 33,000, 30,000, so many people.
Yeah, I'd like to add, you know, a lot of times we think of humans as social creatures. I think of humans as relational creatures. So much of our well-being, both physical and emotional, comes from our relationships. So it doesn't surprise me that, you know, even if students are not, you know, thinking about marriage or even long-term, you know, for the rest of their lives relationships, they are looking for some kind of real connection that they can count on. And that just brings a lot of benefits to personal life. So I'm not surprised by that, but I study relationships and that's my focus. So.
I think I'm on Team Victoria on this one because I think a lot of times what students are coming into the counseling center for ends up being at the heart of the matter really a relationship issue, and a lot of our needs as humans are met in relationships, and so it doesn't surprise me that many of the students are seeking that out. I think even unknowingly that's something that we seek out as humans, and students are doing the same. I think they feel happy and healthy in relationships, so I'm not surprised that that's the statistic that came out.
Well, and there was still that other chunk. There was another percentage that wasn't even represented when you were speaking to the people on campus, and there was a sector of students who were not in the category of seeking a long-term relationship or seeking hookups. There's a section of people who are seeking friendships, or they're just very involved in volunteerism or serving their campus, being in this community without a relationship at all currently. So we have to also consider that and how those social relationships are feeding our souls as well.
Right. Tanner, do you have a good group of your friends that aren't looking for relationships, or do you think that group is represented on campus?
No, there's definitely some, and those are a lot of the people, they're more self-oriented, so they're not really looking for that relationship until they have themselves figured out. So they don't know where they're going after college, they don't know, and they don't want to be tied down by and make a decision based on another person. So they're doing this where they only want friendships. They're not really looking for anything just as a temporary thing, because college is such an interim period and it's not a very stable, like you don't know where you're going after this. So there's definitely that group of people that's out there too.
So I know we've talked about how social media has impacted how students approach dating, but do you think, like you were saying, it's impacted how students approach like their everyday relationships? Like, do you think it's impacted like how they're approaching their dating because how social media has impacted how they think of themselves?
I think there is this weird approach, but I think it's like this. I think it's more misconception, because I think not just social media, but commercials like beer commercials and all this other stuff. There's like this weird conception that you're supposed to be like the smoothest person ever, and you're just supposed to go up to someone and just know the right words to say. And I think that scares people. So I think a lot of people aren't doing that, and so it's like this thing where you're missing out on a lot of opportunities because you're expected to be perfect.
I'll add to that. We are also seeing a lot more options for different types of relationships in terms of who you partner with, in terms of sex and gender, in terms of the kind of relationship. Do you want a very traditional gender roles, egalitarian? And I think in our media, there's still a broad representation of those different types of relationships. And college students are in this period of life that developmentalists are calling emerging adulthood, where you're not really a kid, you're not really a full adult, you're probably still on your parents' health insurance, you know? So yeah, individuals are trying to figure out who they are, and that's going to impact, okay, maybe I want to try this kind of relationship or this kind of partner. So I think social media it's starting to give more options in terms of what's represented.
Right.
Yeah, just going off of that, the in-person social relationship versus the social media's impact on social relationships. But I'm also thinking of what students see from their families, what relationships are really role modeled. And I had an opportunity to work with a group of girls. There were probably 30 in the room, and I said, well, who of you actually has a relationship role model? And you want that relationship. There were maybe 2 girls in the room that could point to a relationship role model. So not only are we struggling with, we don't know what to say in an actual conversation in person, and we may not be we may or may not be communicating that through media, but we also, what are we aspiring to?
Right.
Because sometimes the media is not real, and then we also don't have an authentic thing to strive for.
That's a perfect transition into what we'll talk to after break. After the break, we'll shift to a more cultural point of view as we take a look at how mass media has impacted modern dating.
When I was in foster care, I never knew when I would have to move, so I always had my suitcase ready to go. Then one day, I was adopted. My new parents opened their hearts and home to me. My parents cook my favorite breakfast for me every morning. My parents take me on trips I never thought I would go on. They gave me a home and an even better reason to use that suitcase. My parents aren't perfect, but they're perfect for me.
What about the past couple of days? They happened, you know?
I know that they happened and they were wonderful, but they were also very irresponsible. I have a fiance waiting for me at a hotel who's going to be crushed when he finds out
So you make
what I
love to
did.
me, and then you go back to your husband? Was that your plan? Was that a test that I didn't pass?
I made a promise to a man. He gave me a ring and I gave him my word.
And your word is shot to hell now, don't you think?
I don't know. I'll find out when I talk to him.
This is not about keeping your promise, and it's not about following your heart. It's about security.
What is that supposed to mean?
Money!
What are you talking?
He's got a lot of money.
Now I hate you, you
Well, I
son.
hate you. leave here, I hate you.
What?
Hey, you
I
if
never
you leave
paid
here.
attention to anything that's been happening
I
to
guess
me.
not. I think I must have misread all of those
I
signals.
guess you did.
That was Nicholas Sparks' adaptation of the popular rom-com The Notebook. Rachel McAdams' character finds herself in a situation where she's torn between two men, unsure of which is the better option. What effect do you think clips like this have on young adults? Let's start with Victoria.
Well, that's a really interesting clip because, you know, it's from a few decades ago when we started to see a shift in terms of people's expectations for relationships. So, you know, marriage was no longer about just creating economic stability, but finding, you know, finding yourself in a relationship. So the popularity of rom-coms and any kind of media that really emphasizes this individual connection has helped reinforce that when people are looking for relationships, they're looking for a soulmate. They're looking for someone who fulfills them, and that often can supersede more practical concerns.
Right. Tanner, what do you think about movie clips like this and the impact they have on expectations?
Well, I think, like she said, movies like these are creating this more focus around love being the most important thing. Like, you're supposed to marry the person that you love the most. Like, they've shifted to where it's no longer the economic part. It's not about, you know, making sure you have enough money. It's not about making sure you can get a house. It's not anything about that. People are starting to throw that out the door. And so I think that creates a lot more pressure in certain situations because it has to be that right person. And so there's a lot of these, when movies like this come up, you're starting to feel afraid that it may not be that right person. Like, how do you know that this is the right person and it's not someone that you've yet to meet? So I think it's creating this like nervousness about agreeing to get married and settling down.
Yeah. I think this clip actually reflects, while it's, you know, showing that like passionate relationship, you know, in terms of seeking that out, I think it also reflects some of the struggle that college students face because there's a lot of pressures around choosing a mate and a lot of anxiety and doubt because there's a lot of factors like, does this person have their life figured out? Do they have goals for their future? Can I see them as somebody I could have a family with? I mean, those are all relevant anxieties that come up. So I do think those things are still being, you know, considered in some sense. And it does cause a lot of, you know, parental expectations, and so it causes a lot of pressure around making a decision. Is this the right person? And how do I know this is the right person? Because that's certainly something that I see a lot of students struggle with.
Mm-hmm. And sometimes that pressure can just build up so much that rather than trying to seek out a meaningful relationship, students will go the total other end of the spectrum where they're in that mass hookup culture with Tinder, with Grindr, and it's so much easier to have like an immediate satisfaction moment where you're like, oh, I'm just gonna like see what's good for me right now, because it's too much to think about that one person, finding that one person. And so that puts us in a whole other complex relationship situation, or non-relationship, but rather sexual situation. And that's one thing as a health educator that really scares me, is that hookup culture.
Right.
Yeah.
So we actually have a quote that we're going to share with you guys. So the concept of finding someone better, this whole phenomenon commonly referred to as unrestrained choice, is already being studied in the field of psychology. Dr. Barry Schwartz, a psychology professor at Swarthmore College, says a sense of multiple alternatives of unlimited possibility breeds in us the illusion that perfection exists out there somewhere, if only we could find it. What are your guys' thoughts on this idea of this restlessness in relationships? Because like you guys are saying, people are always looking over their shoulder for what's better, what's more, what's next.
You know, my response to that is, I think sometimes we look at relationships as a thing, like you're a person and you're with another person and the relationship is either good or bad, and we forget that the relationship is a live dynamic and that we actually have a lot of control over it. It's scary because you can never control what another person does, but there's a lot that you can do, and when two partners are working together, that partners can do together to make a relationship better. So rather than think, oh gosh, I've got to find the right person to have the best relationship, it's like find a good person who, you know, has those main core values that are important to you and some basic compatibility, and then work to make that relationship the best.
Tanner, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I've definitely noticed, and you'll make jokes about how you have two friends and they're in a relationship, and then when they're together, it's this different thing. So it's like this relationship is like this third entity that isn't necessarily the two of you being together. It's like you come together and all of a sudden it's completely different. You're two different people, and like it's out of control, like it's out of your control. And so I definitely have noticed that in a lot of my friend groups.
What have you seen being a counselor at the health center?
Well, I mean, I like the idea of educating around that relationship piece, and really, it's an independent society. You know, there a lot of, and in good ways, you know, we're raised to be independent, and so I think there's a lot of education I like to provide around that relationship piece and how to communicate needs and to focus in on that relationship. But I do see where, you know, the social media can create a lot of anxiety for people because there's other options out there, and because of the perception that is put on social media is probably not always accurate reflection of that relationship or that person. And so I do think, you know, it can kind of, I see where people get pulled away from focusing on the relationship with all of the, you know, ways that relationships are displayed on social media. So.
Yeah, I'd like to see more emphasis just on the skill building, how to have effective communication with a partner, because as an adult, I mean, that's something that adults are still always working on. So there's no end perfection, really, but learning how to communicate with a partner, learning how to handle conflict correctly. And I just keep thinking back to Tinder, where you're like, oh, I don't like that, next. And so sometimes we think that that's what we have to do in our relationship. Like, oh, I don't like how this person's dealing with conflict, and I don't know how to deal with conflict, next, I'm done with that.
Yeah, it's like when you get to the piece where you have to say, well, relationships are hard work. And great relationships require that part of conflict and working through it. And it's not just about finding the next person. If this person has great values and they're a good person, stick with them and work through that conflict.
Going off of that, I've noticed that a lot of people think that you have to have that perfect communication and whatever before you can move on to the next step. So that's why a lot of people just say, oh, next, because it's not perfect right now. And so I think that's another thing that we have to try and get rid of, is that when people get married, it's not the perfect relationship. You're constantly working to get to the perfect relationship.
So do you think one of the reasons why people are constantly juggling back and forth between long-term dating, casual dating, that uncertainty is because they're looking for that perfect relationship that's out there?
No, it's interesting. I don't know. I guess going back to the social media, there's so much pressure to present this, like, you know, version of yourself online. And I wonder if, you know, always trying to take the best selfies and whatever online leads to this pressure to always show your best self to another partner. And I wonder if there is, for some people, this, and this is a natural, normal thing for anyone, but I think social media can enhance this tendency to want to avoid vulnerability, letting people see the sides of you that aren't perfect. And so it may just be a little bit scary for people to engage. And so it might be easier to keep relationships a little more superficial, a little shorter.
I completely agree. I think that social media has definitely created this almost like wall that we have between us and everyone else, because it's easier to edit our lives and how we're viewed when you're doing that on your phone screen or your laptop screen, but you can't really edit what you look like or what you're saying when you're in person with somebody. So Tanner, I don't know if you've had that kind of interaction with people where you feel like you're safer behind the phone, because sometimes that is like a safe zone for students our age.
Well, yeah, and you keep mentioning Tinder. Tinder, you get 6 pictures. That's it. So people will sit there and they'll go through and they'll be like, I have a professional photo of me from this one, and then this photo looks really good. So you get these 6 pictures, and then like you'll see them in person. They don't look like that. And so I think there's like this, you create this persona that isn't yourself, and so then it's also like scary to engage with that persona because that they're trying to be perfect, and you're not going to want to you're not going to be inclined to engage with someone who's perfect. And so I think it kind of does create, and if you're just messaging, that's fine, and then as soon as you get to meet, that's when it gets like you're trying to meet with this perfect person, like the pressure gets too much.
So what are y'all's final thoughts on dating in modern society? Do you guys see this changing anytime soon, or what are y'all's final thoughts?
I think, human tendencies are pretty stable, so I don't see any of these issues going away. I do see social media is capable of maybe enhancing certain negative and positive tendencies that we have, and so I would just say, if I had advice to college students is figure out who you are, don't be scared of relationships, but be responsible in them to yourself and others, and figure out what's important to you and be true to that. And yeah, it's going to be a little messy sometimes.
Tanner, what are your final thoughts?
I think if anything is to change, it's got to be through social media, because I think social media is what's going to cause negative effects. But if we shift as a society and get social media to talk about the positive things, I think it could shift it to a positive direction. So I think it all is going to change around what is portrayed in social media in the future.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're certainly, Tanner, we're going in that direction, so I don't know that we could, we kind of have to go with it. And I think it's just the beginning of sort of learning how people are navigating this and trying to manage to have really healthy, positive relationships. And I think it's possible within this new dating culture.
I will end with, I think if people are using Tinder or Grindr, that they should wear a condom. So learn how to communicate and actually do that, but also learn those communication skills, as we've all been saying, because it's endless and you will always need them.
Right. And so my last question is, where would you guys offer advice for, I know you work at the health center, what's your best advice if people are seeking out help or want to talk with someone about relationships?
Sure. Counselors love to talk about relationships, so students are welcome to come into Cook Counseling Center and make an appointment. We love to talk about communication and how to have healthy relationships. I think it can be preventative. And so, sure, Cook Counseling Center.
Could I add, if there's someone with a relationship concern where they're looking for a little extra confidentiality and there may be some concerns, the Women's Resource Center is also valuable. Place to go.
Thank you, guys. All right, that will wrap up this special edition of the Newsfeed. A big thank you to our guests for joining us today. If you have a story idea or even a talk show idea for the Newsfeed, let us know. Send us an email at thenewsfeednrv@gmail.com. And as always, you can connect with the Newsfeed on Facebook and Twitter. Thanks for watching. I'm Chloe Spillane.